Alright, so hi Mrs. Nasser, thank you so much for helping me with my speech. I'm just going to give it to you. I have the script because I added a new part and I wasn't sure if I had it memorized or not, but I'll give it a go anyway. Alright, so let's begin. On February 6, 1911, a boy was born to a family of three. They lived in a tiny apartment above a bank building because they, like many other people during their time period, were too poor to afford anything else. The father of the family later went on to become an alcoholic. The mother died many years later after suffering from Alzheimer's. But the little boy who was born in that very apartment later joked, "We didn't have any other contact with a bank than that." That boy's name was Ronald Reagan. One of the confounding mysteries of Reagan's life was how a boy whose family was so poor grew up to be one of the most influential men in modern times. With the presidential elections approaching, there have been many references to Ronald Reagan because he was the last truly great Republican president we had. In the book Ronald Reagan, How an Ordinary Man Became an Extraordinary Leader, Reagan defined the challenge of leadership as having the vision to dream of a better, safer world, and the courage, persistence, and patience to turn that dream into a reality. Reagan believed that you need the vision, the ability to take action, and finally the consent of the people in order to become a good leader. Reagan's vision was evident to all of the fact that he could clearly see that the Soviet Union would crumble, because he had complete and utter confidence that freedom and democracy would prevail. But let's take a closer look at the man and the aspects of his character that enabled him to become such an effective leader. Reagan accomplished many things throughout his life. As president of the Screen Actors Guild, he single-handedly stopped the advance of communism in Hollywood. As governor of California, he inherited a bankrupt state, but raised the taxes, and returned all that money back to the people in 4 tax rebates. He was governor during a time of social turmoil with the Vietnam War, yet he stood for what he knew was right, and earned the respect of many of his adversaries. But as President of the United States of America, Reagan impacted many more people than he had ever done before. Why did Ronald Reagan become one of the greatest presidents in this nation's history? Because he did what he knew was right, even in difficult situations. When looking at Reagan's life, we can learn 3 very important lessons. The first is that we are never defeated unless we give up on God. The second lesson we can learn from Reagan is to stick to our principles and what we know is right. And the third and final lesson is that true greatness lies in our willingness to serve others. So let's talk about this first lesson. The very first lesson we can learn from Reagan's life is that we are never defeated unless we give up on God. Reagan had a very difficult childhood in which he learned this lesson. Reagan's father, Jack, was an alcoholic. Jack would disappear for days before returning home and collapsing on the lawn. Reagan confessed that there were times he had to drag his father, virtually comatose, into the house. But whatever Reagan felt, he clung to his faith in God, and through his mother's example, he never abandoned his father. Even when people started gossiping about Jack, Reagan was always there to stick up for him. The stability that he gained from his faith in God enabled him to convey confidence to the American public, even in the face of tragedy. In 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded during liftoff, killing all 7 of its crew members and leaving America in utter shock and horror. But as Reagan gave his address to this tragedy, we stopped being scared. You see, Reagan was able to communicate the pain that everyone felt, but in a way never before seen. In his address to the nation, he said, "The future does not belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. The Challenger crew was pulling us into the future, and we will continue to follow them." You see, America walked away from the Challenger tragedy stronger because of Reagan's ability to frame the incident in a way that inspired hope and encouragement. Hope and encouragement that their deaths were not in vain, as we continue on our path to discovery. Another tragedy that struck America was the bombing of Beirut. A truck carrying 2,000 pounds of explosives drove into the Marine compound in Beirut, Lebanon, killing many United States service personnel. In his book, An American Life, Reagan said, "The lowest point during my 8 years in Washington was the day when 241 Marines lost their lives during the bombing of our Marine barracks in Beirut. One of the things about being president I never got used to was consoling the families of men and women who died in the service of their country. something that was necessary far too many times during my term in office. The second lesson we can learn from Reagan is to always stick to our principles and do what we know is right. Reagan did not use polls to govern his actions, and he refused to let others dictate what he would do. Reagan was a man of principles. He was not a man governed by polls. Most politicians use opinion surveys to determine what the American people think about a particular issue. Then they develop policy. Now, this would seem to make sense, as many people understand that in a democratic society, the people are entitled to determine the course of public policy. However, we live in a representative democracy in which the people choose presidents and members of Congress to make policy. A true leader understands that public opinion on most issues is usually uninformed. And Reagan felt that he was elected in order to exercise his judgment to the best of his ability after he explored the issue in question. You see, he used the polls to figure out what the people thought, to identify where the people disagreed with him, so that he could use his power of persuasion to change their minds, according to Reagan's pollster. Reagan felt confident that once the people had more information, they would agree with his chosen course of action. Reagan's commitment to his principles was tested during his first year in office, when he went up against the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization. You see, this union was one of the few unions that supported Reagan's candidacy. They decided to go on strike until their demands for reduced workloads and higher salaries were met. Most new presidents were not allowed to alienate a powerful union who supported him and were shutting down air traffic. However, because these workers had taken an oath not to strike against the United States government, Reagan felt that their actions were both illegal and immoral, so he gave them 48 hours to show up for work. When they didn't, he hired replacements. This could have been a disaster if there would have been an accident, but Reagan took that chance. He stood up to them, and this incident set the tone for his entire presidency, as people saw that he would not be bullied. The third and final lesson we can glean from Reagan's years in office is that true greatness lies in our willingness to serve others. One of the things Ronald Reagan loved most about being president was helping others. He said in his book, An American Life, "One of the unexpected pleasures of the presidency has nothing to do with economic problems or international crisis. It is the opportunity to lend a hand now and then to other human beings." Once in May of 1982, Reagan heard of a black family who worked for the federal government, but had been harassed and had a cross burned on their lawn. He canceled all of his meetings for that afternoon, grabbed Nancy, and drove down to their house. He spent the entire afternoon with them, and when he left in his motorcade, people from the surrounding neighborhoods applauded. But that family was never harassed again. This concern for the individual American citizen ended up extending to humanity as a whole. The most pressing issue during 1985 was nuclear war. He said in his book, An American Life, "I had been looking forward to this day for more than 5 years." This was the day when he met for talks with Mikhail Gorbachev, the leader of the Soviet Union. Reagan told him, "Here you and I are, 2 men in a room, probably the only 2 men in the world who could bring about World War III. But by that same token, we may be the only 2 men in the world who could perhaps bring about peace in the world." Reagan had one goal in mind during his presidency, and that was keeping humanity safe. He accomplished that goal. Prior to the 1980 elections, the American people were told by their presidents that the golden age of America was over, and that citizens had to start getting used to having less and less. Reagan never saw that vision. Instead, he saw a city on a hill, right before daylight, and he wanted to take that city into the light and make it stronger than ever. Yes, Reagan built up America's military and physical strength, but he also built up our spiritual strength. Reagan built up America's morale. He transformed us from a sad, defeated country into a young, vibrant, and hopeful country. Even in his last words to the American people, we see that he never lost his optimism. In closing, let me thank you, the American people, for giving me the great honor of allowing me to serve as your president. And if the Lord calls me home, whenever that may be, I will leave the greatest love for this country of ours and eternal optimism for its future. I now begin the journey that will lead me to the sunset of my life. But I know that for America, there will always be a bright dawn ahead of it. In the end, It wasn't power or prestige that allowed Reagan to succeed in life. He was not born into a wealthy family, and he definitely did not receive the best education possible. But that didn't stop him from reaching for the stars. That didn't stop him from becoming the greatest president in American history. People call it the American dream. How someone so poor could rise up and become something more than what society had originally deemed him to be. Reagan trusted in God's plan, let principle guide his actions, and focused his life on helping and serving others. By following these three beliefs, Reagan made an immeasurable impact on the world. We all have a dream in life. Reagan dreamt of a younger, stronger America. He died with the knowledge that America will always have a bright future ahead of it. He made America great again. Thank you so much.